guys, today we are talking about this pedal right here. This is the OC-3 Super Octave Stomp Box by Boss. This claims to be the world's first polyphonic octave pedal. What it does in simple terms is takes whatever note you're playing on guitar and sticks a note below it, one octave below, so it gives a really nice warm thickness that you might normally get from, say, a bassist. Let's start by talking about the remarkable sturdiness of Boss products. I've had this one for about 10 years, and it sounds as good now as it did out of the box on day one. I've lent it to, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 guitarists. I think it's survived at least one tour and a couple other reasonably intense live shows, so it's held up really well. I've gigged with it, I think maybe twice, but I've used it a lot in the studio and a lot of just sonic experiments and playing around and fun. The paint's chipped, I think there's bits stuck to it, it's still a bit sticky, that's unpleasant, but it's survived for 10 years and it still sounds great. So this is the great thing about Boss products, is that it's not like you're going to have to replace it a few years down the line because it's broken. Boss products tend not to break, which is really helpful, to be honest. Let's take a look at how to operate it. First off, power. You've got this thing on the back, which is where you plug in your 9-volt power, or if you want to use a battery, you use this button here to undo the stomp box bit of it, and the battery lives inside there. And then you turn it on by treading on it. Easy, like all other stomp boxes pretty much. In terms of connections, as you can see, you've got a guitar in and a bass in. This does work with bass as well as guitar. Guitar is this one here, bass is this one here. Easy enough to remember. In terms of outputs, this lower one of the two, which says mono, is your main output. So you plug something into that one, you're going to get your synthesized bass and your original signal out. However, if you plug something into the top one, your top one is going to output your guitar sound or your original sound that you're inputting, and the second one, the lower one, is going to output only the bass note. And that makes it great in terms of the sonic possibilities, which we'll get to in a minute. Let's have a look at the buttons at the top here. So this first one is your direct level, so the level of whatever you're putting into it. If you put it down here, the thing you're putting into it will not be heard. If you put it up here, it will be quite loud. The second button is the volume of the octave, the sub octave that is being added on top. Down here you won't hear anything and you will have rendered your pedal entirely useless. Up here your bass note will be quite loud. So this third button does a few different things depending on what mode it's in. We'll look more at those in just a second. This last button on the right here actually switches between the 3 modes. So this one changes dependent on what this one is set to, right? So you've got a drive mode, a 2-octave mode, and a polyphonic mode. So let's have a look at those. So I'm going to plug it in now and we can have a listen to what it actually does depending on the 3 modes. Dual octave mode. This adds a new note an octave below your original note. Simple enough. And you can dial in the level with the second button. So it is entirely possible to have an exclusively bass sound. You've just got to do this. So that would sound like just a bass by itself. In this mode, the third button allows you to dial in an additional lower octave, so you've got your original note, the octave below, and an octave below that, which sounds like this. And again, you can have either or both of those sub-octaves played entirely by themselves if you really want to. Now onto the drive mode. The drive mode adds distortion to your bass output. So you can have a slightly distorted bass sound, like this, or a really distorted bass sound, like this. Now on to poly mode, the third mode, which allows you to play more than one note at a time. So with the third button, it actually dials in where the octave comes in. So if you're down here, it's only going to be the lower notes on your guitar neck that actually have an octave added to them, whilst up here, it's going to be most of the notes on your guitar that have an octave added. I think at about the 12 o'clock position, notes are affected up to the second A on your guitar, which is the 12th fret on your A string or the second fret on your G string. Although I have to say, I think thinner strings, it's a lot harder to hear. So this could be useful if you want to do some riffs down here and then some single notes or chords higher up the neck, and then only the lower notes are actually going to be effective. So it's kind of like synthesizing a call and response style thing that you might normally do with the bassist, swapping riffs and swapping melodies and so forth, except you're just doing that as one person, I guess. Or you could use it to play open chords and only have the lower notes of those chords affected. For example, if you're not careful with the settings, it can get a bit muddy and crowded sounding, which is always going to be a risk with anything that alters or adds pitch to a guitar sound or a bass sound, especially in the lower register of notes. So I just suggest with that being careful and making sure you actually plan what you're going to play and plan that the pedal is going to do what you want it to do. Play with it a lot. Basically, don't just plug it in and expect it to go instantly, because it's not going to. You've also got to really make sure that your guitar is properly tuned and properly intonated. The reason being that the pedal might struggle to know what note you actually want to output, so it can kind of sound like it's wavering between two pitches because it's not quite sure. You should be checking your tuning and intonation regularly anyway, but just again, you really have to with this pedal. Also, the tracking isn't incredible. Tracking being the note that follows the note that you're playing. So what I mean by that is it can sort of waver if you're doing vibrato or bending, but it's not a pleasant waver like a vibrato or a bend. It just sounds a bit digital and horrible. But if you are in tune, and if you try to pull back the vibrato a little bit, you can get away with it. And also, if you've got the distorted channel on, you tend to not notice that anyway. I don't really think it's bad sounding. I just want you to know that it's not amazing. That doesn't mean bad, it means not amazing. I think the pedal has more application in a live setting than it does in a studio, and I'm not saying don't use it as a cool audio toy in the studio. I'm saying that I think it will have more impact live than it will on an album, for example. Let's have a talk about the possible rig setups you could do with this. You could use this pedal to do the power duo thing that's really big at the moment. I think probably Royal Blood are to blame for that. So you could do something similar to Royal Blood but using a guitar and this pedal to synthesize the lower bass notes. I usually use the two outputs to center two different amps, so the lower output will go to a bass amp and the higher output will go to a guitar amp, and then you can compress, EQ, distort those separate channels however you choose to do so. And that's actually what I've been doing for all the guitar parts I've recorded today for this video. And I'm sure if you've got any other bass effects lying around, like wahs or filters, vocal effects, or anything else pitchy, you could make some ridiculous dubstep noises with this as well. Not that you should, just that you might. Let's talk about price. This is currently going online for about £110, which, yeah, I think that's worth it. I paid less than that, but that was 10 years ago. I'm told there's a recession on and the government doesn't want me to buy food, so to conclude, will this pedal substitute a bassist? No. Absolutely, imperatively, it will not. But it will thicken your guitar sound and add depth that a bassist would if a bassist isn't available or appropriate for whatever reason. I think this pedal has got some massive opportunities inside of it for not a huge amount of money really, but I think it's absolutely worth getting to know and really properly thinking about what you're going to play with it. It's not plug and play exactly like a lot of music gear is now. I think you've got to be prepared to put some work into it to actually know what it's capable of. But once you've worked that out, there is a lot that you're able to do with it. What's the test they always say? If it's stolen, would you replace it? Yeah, I think I probably would. I've got a couple different pedals, multi-effects pedals and rack units which do similar things about as well as this does, but actually I'd love to have something reliable in like a solid Boss compartment that I can trust will do this effect and not let me down for at least 10 years. So yeah, if it was stolen, I would absolutely replace it. I'd probably try to injure the human that stole it from me first. That would be my priority, I think. So yeah, that has been the OC-3 Super Octave pedal by Boss. I really hope you buy one because they're a lot of fun. Just be prepared to put the work in. This has been LTGuitar. I put out videos every single week on Fridays at 4 PM GMT or thereabouts, so I suggest you subscribe. If you have any comments about this pedal or about the channel in general, you can leave that in the comments section below. That is what it's for. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time. Toodaloo.